I'm going to start this talk. Um, this this Tim talk is going to be called "The Fawn That Gave Its Life Up for the Boys." Early on in my, this is another Tim story. Early on in my career here on the land, I had a boys rite of passage, and we're busy cooking dinner one night, and we've been having a very wildly intense class, learning and growing. And a couple of the boys come up to me and they go, "Tim, there's a little baby deer that keeps coming up to us over in the camp. What should we do?" And they knew that I'd spent years running wildlife rescues, and it was my land, and I care about all the animals that live on our land so much, being the caretaker here. So I stopped and I thought for a moment, and I told them, I think it probably lost its mother and was looking for her. And being such a young baby, it had no fear of people. So it was coming to them, hoping maybe to get some milk or something, or a little attention. And the best thing we could do is just leave it alone. Because if we left it alone, hopefully its mother would find it. Now, normally what happens with baby fawns when they're first born, for about the first week, give or take, the mothers, because they're so weak and just growing into themselves, the mothers will leave them in a spot and they'll wander off to feed. They'll come back to them. So they depend on hiding, not to be eaten by a bear or something like that, right? A mountain lion or something like that. Most of the time that works. Sometimes it doesn't. For some reason, this little guy got up and started wandering, and I don't think his mother could find him. So we wished the best to the baby, and we went on about our business. And later that night, I hear this screaming. And the boys, too, they're looking at me. They're going, "What is that?" I knew the call. It was a fawn in deep trouble, screaming for help. So I grabbed all the boys and we ran to the sound of the scream. As we get there, we chase off a coyote that had cornered the fawn. And nothing against the coyote. It found a potentially great meal. More power to it. I love coyotes. But this was about the fawn this day. And the fawn was so terrified that it affected her health, her well-being. And I don't think she didn't look good. She was breathing hard, could barely stand up. And I had about 20 boys with me. So I sat down on the ground, I took the fawn, I laid her in my lap, because I knew she wasn't going to make it. And every boy sat around me and put their hands on her, and we all gave her healing, and blessing, and hope. And we hoped for a miracle. We hoped she'd wake up, feel good again, and find her mom. But that wasn't what the spirits of the land had in store for us that day. We gave our best to that fawn, and she died in my lap with the hands of the boys on her. And that day, we all changed. She gave her life up, and it changed ours forever, for the good. We got introduced, particularly the boys, to the idea of death and dying, of this thing called death that so permeates all life. Everything that's born and lives dies, right? But so often in our modern culture, we ignore death or don't deal with it. And it's a huge thing we have to deal with. I think our ancestors had a much better relationship with life and death. And they had ceremonies around death and so forth. While we do some in our modern culture, often we just kind of ignore it. So we all cried. Lots of boys crying that day. We held that little fawn, passed her around. Everybody gave her a big hug. And she taught us that day how to love and how to let go, and how nature works, how the world works. A lot of deep thought came into us. And later that night, took the boys into our roundhouse and we had a talk on death and dying. And some had lost parents and or siblings or friends. And, you know, I'd lost my sister and not too long before that. And so we shared openly about it. And it's a conversation that you just don't see people having much. And yet it's so vital. So I thank that deer for that day. And we went back the next morning. I'd left her right there. I knew it was going to happen. I don't think they did. But we went back the next morning, and the coyote had patiently waited and came in and got her and ate her. So she became the coyote. And the coyote got to live another day full of fawn. And she taught us that fawn. And I guess maybe more important than anything, she is a memory in our memory banks for our entire lives. We'll never forget that day at Headwaters Outdoor School in the woods at the foot of Mount Shasta, where that little baby fawn laid in my lap and everybody touched her and gave her a blessing, and she passed away. We were forever changed. And I think for the better. And it wasn't easy, and it's still not easy.